Freddy Krueger, everyone's favorite supernatural, nocturnal, homicidal maniac. In the short 5 years between the first film, now up to the fifth film in this series, Freddy had become one of the most known and talked about film characters of the 1980s. At this point, people were certainly noticing a shift from genuine scares to a more commercially friendly attitude, with a focus more on Freddy's sense of humor and his dream magic and having his teenage victims fall prey in oh so ironic and clever ways. By the time we got to part 5, Freddy really wasn't all that scary and didn't pose much of a threat, and he was almost becoming the hero of these movies instead of this dark, scary, nightmare-inducing figure of absolute evil that should be feared, not enjoyed. That was kind of a problem, but that's just how the series progressed, and let's try not to be too judgmental here. Yes, Freddy makes all those silly jokes and has all those corny lines, but he's been out there a long time, killing all the kids. He's gotten pretty good at it. And you gotta keep things interesting. You gotta amuse yourself. You can accuse Freddy of many things, but the guy enjoys his work, and we should all take such pleasure out of our own careers. And he really goes for it. He's not some slacker, only going out on a killing spree only one day out of a year, like some of those other hacks out there. No, he's working hard to get things done. He wants to kill as much as possible, finding weird little dream loopholes that allow him to cross over into prohibited territory. I mentioned this last time, but he's got to have some kind of dream lawyer at his disposal, overviewing the legalities of dream state homicide in excruciating detail to find a way to supersede whatever rules and regulations have been set up by whatever powers that be in this dream world. But there comes a time in every man's life where he has to say, hey, I can't keep doing this forever. I need someone to take over the family business when I die. If I can die. I need a next of kin to follow in my footsteps. So that would be what more or less we have going on in Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. And yes, they seem to be desperate for ideas at this point. Why are they still calling it Nightmare on Elm Street, by the way? All the Elm Street kids are dead now. Technically, they should be calling it Nightmare in Springwood, but whatever. This one picks up where Part 4 left off, still following Lisa Wilcox's Alice character, and the story begins with her graduating high school, which is kind of amazing to see in one of these movies, since most of the characters we meet don't live long enough to finish high school, so there's that. And things are going pretty okay. Freddy's gone, she has some new friends, things are going well with her boyfriend Dan, maybe a bit too well, as, well, she doesn't know just yet, she's pregnant. And that's how the murders start happening again. Since Alice has the Dream Master Gatekeeper power that allows Freddy to pass through to other people's dreams, as we saw in the last film, as we saw her overcome in the last film, it would mean that this power has, I guess, passed down to her unborn child, or at least it's been temporarily passed down because they're sharing a body, connected by the umbilical cord, or bonded by motherly love, or whatever the case may be. Are you writing this down? Good, because there's more. So the movie starts with the credits rolling, splicing between a sex scene, more specifically a conception scene, which you don't see often. Well, except in Look Who's Talking, which is an amazing opening credits scene, by the way. But anyway, Alice, once the seeds of her child are planted, so are the seeds of Freddy's rebirth and his new scheme. So what we can see in that first dream sequence in the beginning is that Alice is dreaming of Freddy's mother, Amanda Krueger, and the awful and fateful night that she was raped by 100 maniacs, resulting in Freddy's conception. So he's getting that in her mind. And later on, when Alice is asleep and dreaming, and, well, I assume her unborn child is dreaming as well, she dreams of Freddy's birth. So Freddy gets Alice, or her fetus, to dream up his birth, and this ugly Freddy baby thing is born out of Amanda, whose spirit is also in the dream world too, because as we'd later find out, her body was never buried, and her soul is at unrest, much like Freddy's was in Part 3, which would make sense as to why she had such a spectral presence in that film, even though in Part 3 she was an old lady, and in Part 5 she's much younger, but never mind that. She's apparently the only thing standing between Freddy and Alice's child, and Freddy locks her away, and the only way to get her to help is to find her corpse in the church tower or something. I don't know. Why she couldn't just stop it right away isn't exactly clear. So Freddy, he dreams up his own birth, and meanwhile in the dream world, Alice's baby, now named Jacob, whose soul is also in the dream world, appearing as about a 5 or 6 year old, is encountering Freddy and being lied to and tricked into thinking that his mom doesn't love him, so he'll pick sides with Freddy. And Freddy's killing the kids as he usually does, and he's feeding the souls to Jacob to make him more powerful and to make him like him or something. I don't know. This movie makes no fucking sense, really. But it is what it is. And I really do like the Alice character, so I was happy to see her story continue. And though the story here directly continues from the fourth film with the same characters, and in the same gatekeeper, dream master rules, and all that, the two films couldn't be more different. The Dream Master had this manic sense of urgency to it, and it was really deranged, but fast-paced and entertaining. The Dream Child, however, goes for a different tone. This movie is a lot slower, creating a different mood. Almost has this kind of gothic atmosphere to it, which to its credit, I think works really well. The set design is really up to snuff when it comes to assisting with the atmosphere, and we get some impressive locations visually. There are some really cool matte paintings that open the locations up a good amount, giving it a grander feel. And while, yes, they are noticeably matte paintings, they're still done well. And the art direction has to be the highlight. As well as the playful style that director Stephen Hopkins brings to the scenes, with some really ambitious cinematography, actually, and some clever special effects. I thought that scene at the beginning, at the prison, was really good and pretty chilling. And it's nice to actually get to see these events that we only really heard about in the previous film. Getting a little bit more insight into Freddy's origins. And not even really done in a cheap way or anything, because it isn't like a flashback. It's a dream, so it's obscured and a little more surreal. In fact, in that scene, it's actually Alice in the place of Amanda, habit and all. There's also a really nicely done scene at the end where there's the showdown between Alice and Jacob and Freddy, where there's some homage done to the infamous Escher stairs, which seem to go in all directions, very disorienting and dreamlike, and a perfect match for a Nightmare on Elm Street film. When it comes to the dream scenes, the kills in this one kind of result with a mixed bag overall. Alice's boyfriend, Dan, he's the first to be killed, and the scene involves him on a motorcycle, with Freddy taking over and sort of melding him into the machinery of the vehicle, and making it this sordid cyberpunk kind of fate, which isn't bad. It's actually kind of cool, but it doesn't really have anything to do with anything. I guess the connection is that he's fast on the football team, and Freddy repeats a line that his father says to him at the beginning. He says, "This boy has the need for speed." So he's fast, like a motorcycle. All right. The death is made to look like a drinking and driving accident, but of course, we know better. We know Freddy did it, and we know Freddy's back at this point. Probably the most memorable and disturbing scene of the movie is Greta's death. She's the young model, Alice's friend. She's under pressure from her mother to always look beautiful, to always watch what she eats, and in a subtle way that's not 2 explored. This is kind of the series' look at teenage eating disorders. Greta falls asleep at the dinner table, and surprise, surprise, Freddy appears, ready to serve the main course. Using his claw as sort of like a spork, he feeds herself to herself by digging into her gut and stuffing it into her mouth until her cheeks are looking ready to burst, and it's pretty fucking disturbing, actually. The movie has more of a comic booky, cartoony sensibility to it, so it doesn't go too over the top with this. Like, under different execution, this could have been an even more twisted and even more gruesome and terrifying moment. So conceptually, it's pretty messed up, but it's not done in a way that's particularly off-putting. Even with that in mind, this was the most heavily censored scene of the movie, so there are quite a few cuts to it. And to date, the uncut version of the film is only available on a VHS version produced after this film's release. I think the uncut scenes are up on YouTube, but still, shame on you. Shame on you, New Line, for not releasing the unrated version on DVD or Blu-ray. Maybe someday. Finally, there's the scene with Mark, who's the comic book nerd, getting pulled into a comic book into his dream. That's a pretty awesome idea in and of itself, and this scene is alright, but it probably would have been a lot cooler if, say, for example, the scene had been entirely animated. That would have been really something that would have stood out, I think. Instead, it's just this black and white warehouse. Freddy's in black and white. He's going around on a skateboard. Mark turns into his comic book alter ego, the Phantom Prowler, or whatever, and tries to kill Freddy, but Freddy turns into Super Freddy and slices and dices him. And that's it. In all honesty, I'm not that big of a gore hound, but I think the Dream Child probably could have benefited from some more kills, just to keep things interesting, just to keep the tension high. But it's hard at this point. We're invested in the Alice character. We're invested in the well-being of her baby, sure, and maybe somewhat invested in Dan. It was kind of sad to see him go. But friend A, friend B, friend C, it's hard to care all too much because at this point we know the drill. It's going through the motions, so we know additional characters are included just to die. And, I mean, they try their best to flesh them out, to make them as sympathetic as possible. The one friend, Yvonne, who actually ends up surviving, actually has one of the most annoying screams ever, so that probably doesn't help the case all that much. But the characters aren't that interesting. And of course, we have to go through all the explaining about Freddy Krueger and the dream killing and all the friends thinking she's crazy and then finally believing her and all that stuff. So as much as I do enjoy some of the very imaginative aspects that have been brought to this movie with the dream sequences, there are other sections of the movie that are very much been there, done that, which is not to say it's completely devoid of anything interesting there, because they do a good enough job continuing Alice's story and focusing on her and her mission to stop Freddy once again, this time around doing it to defend her unborn child, who she meets and bonds with in the dream world, which is pretty cool. It's pretty intriguing to see that. And with where the series has been taken after all this time, its target audience for, say, the first film, second film, third film has to be a lot older now, and it tries to take on more of a mature tone. And Freddy Krueger aside, teenage pregnancy is a scary concept, especially for this character whose boyfriend was killed and now faces being a single teenage mom. You don't need any ghosts or ghouls or slashers to make that any more of a frightening situation than it already is. And there's some nice moments here and there. Her dad, who was the alcoholic asshole in the last film, he's clean and sober now, going to AA meetings, and he's supportive. She even asks him if he's disappointed in her about the pregnancy, and he's very understanding about it. And there's actually a very sweet scene later on when Dan's parents, who have gotten word of Alice being under duress, they threaten to battle for the baby's custody. And he comes to her defense and kicks them out of the house. So that was nice. And they even do bring up kind of the taboo subject that's probably been lingering in the audience's mind anyway. Mark brings up the point, if Freddy's killing people through the baby, then if there's no baby, there's no Freddy. What about an abortion? With no hesitation, Alice turns the notion down, but you have to applaud the movie a little bit for at least bringing it up. They could have easily avoided it entirely and not even touched on that, but it's at least given mention, which I appreciate. Even when the Nightmare on Elm Street series is at its lowest points, we can always count on Robert Englund to deliver with the Freddy Krueger character. And as usual, he's good, he's fun, but even he seems to be going through the same old with this one. All those motions, and he's become so good at it that ironically, he could do the role in his sleep. Freddy does come off as kind of an ineffectual doofus, afraid of his mommy in this one, doesn't he? That combined with the general silliness makes for Freddy not being all too threatening or scary. And I wasn't crazy about the makeup either. It doesn't look quite right. I don't know. It's a lot easier to point out the flaws in this film, more so than it is for Part 4, because it just isn't as fast-paced. It doesn't have that shock-per-minute energy to it, nor does it really intend to, I think. But that brings up some problems. When all the strange dream rules and complications laid before us, it's almost just too much. Like, I don't even really know what the hell is going on with the ending. So Freddy's been manipulating Jacob to be evil or something, but he's starting to get wise that he shouldn't be hanging around with scarred dudes in Christmas sweaters. Freddy had Alice backed into a corner, and he's, I guess, fusing with her or absorbing her. I don't know. She's in trouble, though, at the end. But it's at that moment when Yvonne finds the remains of Amanda Krueger in the tower, and I guess just finding her skeleton, brings her soul to peace, and she comes into the dream. She gives Jacob a little pep talk. He tricks Freddy into thinking that he's on his side, and he lets Alice go. But then Jacob spits the souls out back into Freddy. Then they're like flying out of him, out of his back, dragging him along, and then they rip out the little ugly demon baby Freddy thing, and then Amanda picks him up, stuffs him back up her twat. Well, not really, but for all intents and purposes. And the last thing we see is Freddy's adult arm coming out of her pregnant belly, swiping his claws, and she's screaming, and a bunch of doors are being slammed shut, then broken open. It's strange. Not a really reassuring ending, but it leaves on a cliffhanger, I guess. And hey, Alice seems fine by the end. She gets another happy ending. This would be her last appearance in a Nightmare on Elm Street film, and I like to think that she just went on to have a happy, normal life after this one. A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, isn't the greatest, but over the years I think I've warmed to it. I like it just fine, I guess. I would say most of the problems stem from the writing, but you have to consider how fast they made it. Like, really, between 1984 and 1989, they made 5 of these movies, which is impressive. They had to knock them out fast, not only due to the high demand, but because there was competition out there, and these nightmare movies are a lot more elaborate of a production than your average Friday the 13th or Halloween film. But you could tell the series was running out of steam and low on ideas, and it shows in the work. It does. But that's not to take away from the talent brought to this movie. Robert Englund is legendary as Freddy, and this is yet another piece of his great legacy. Lisa Wilcox is a fantastic heroine as Alice, the best since Nancy, really. And The Dream Child ultimately puts its own stamp on the series, with a distinct atmosphere, awesomely 80s special effects, and a continued devotion to bringing more imagination and fantasy to the horror genre. Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, that's my review. Or technically, I guess the official title is Nightmare on Elm Street, The Dream Child, but whatever, it's part 5, everybody knows that. yeah, this is not one of the most loved entries in the series, but I don't know. It's grown on me over the years, as I mentioned, so I find it watchable at the very least. So comment below, let me know what you think about this one. I'd be curious to see if it has its fans out there. But hope you enjoyed watching this video. There are, of course, more coming soon. Keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, comment, rate, subscribe, all that good stuff, and stay tuned for more. And till then, I'll see you later.